Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. My name is Janice Malillo, your host. Have you ever been in a situation where you perhaps have lost all hope? Well, I have to tell you that my guest this evening, her father, her family, herself, and her siblings, her mom, they never lost hope. I am so excited to welcome to the Stories podcast, Jamie Blanco Gallant. And again, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Did I do okay?
Hi, Janice. Thank you for having me. You did great.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I'm so excited to start the conversation. Now, along with being you have so many different titles, but I want to get right to what we're here to chat about, your book, and really your dad's book as well. And I have to show the book. The cover is actually absolutely beautiful, and it's entitled, excuse me, Hope for the Hopeless: How One Man Fought the World's Deadliest Brain Tumor on His Terms and Won. Jamie is the co-author of this amazing book, along with her dad, who passed away a few years ago, Jimmy Blanco. And it's her dad's story, really, of triumph in the face of such adversity. Jamie, can you tell us a little bit about the backdrop of your dad's story?
Sure. So my father, Jimmy Blanco, was born in New Jersey, the son of Cuban immigrants. He had a rough and tumble upbringing. He served in the military, and when he came out, he was bouncing around for a little bit. He was a taxi driver, then a truck driver. He moved to Miami, where he eventually met my mother while he was driving for a wine company, and she was the secretary. And he started a beautiful family down in Miami. He went to school. He became a respiratory therapist with all of the, he got all of his certifications within a short period of time. And, he was well known in South Florida medical circles, for his work that he did in nearly every hospital down there in Miami. But it was at 1995 in October, my mother's birthday, when he was driving to work to Miami Children's Hospital one night and suffered a grand mal seizure behind the wheel of the car. And miracle number one, there was oncoming traffic that he didn't just, die right there in a head-on collision, but his car rolled into the front yard of this little old lady and just gently came and collided with a giant statue of Buddha, which I think was the first sort of miracle right there. And they took him to the hospital. At first they thought he was a drunk driver. No, he was having a medical emergency, and they discovered the worst possible thing. They discovered a glioblastoma, multiforme, grade 4, the world's deadliest, most aggressive recurring cancer in his brain. There was a massive tumor, and he had to have emergency surgery right then and there. And so he was a young dad. He was 36 years old, the same age that I am right now, with 3 little kids. I was 9, my brothers were 8 and 6. And he got this horrible, the worst thing that you want to hear at that point, that he has not only this terrible diagnosis, but less than 4 months to live. And he was given no hope for survival. He was told, no matter what you do, this is going to kill you. You have, if we do chemo and radiation, you'll have maybe a few weeks longer to live. And there was nothing else that the medical professionals could do for them. There was nothing else that the doctors could do. Most people would take that and, and they'd be like, well, that's it. Let me get my affairs in order. But my dad, who's this rough and tumble, New Jersey street guy, was like, no, no, you don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to tell me when I'm done. And the first thing he did was with that was that he really looked within, and he decided to rely on his deep faith, and he put everything in God's hands from day one. He said, "You know what? I'm not going to listen to the naysayers. I'm going to put everything in God's hands. God is going to cure me, and I'm going to prove everybody wrong." And it was the strength of that devotion, the strength of that, that wanting to stick it to the man, right? To prove everybody wrong. And the extent to which he deeply, deeply believed that, that was so powerful. And it was about 3 weeks after that first surgery, where they removed this massive tumor from his brain, that he was speaking before our church. So we went to a little Christian elementary school, small congregation, and he gave a speech before the congregation and said exactly that. He said, "God is going to heal me, and I'm not going anywhere." And he thanked, and asked everyone for their prayers. He was given 3 months to live, maybe 3.5 months to live. He lived 8 incredible years. 8 years with no chemo, no radiation, only using holistic natural medicines, using supplements, relying on his faith, and relying on mental fortitude techniques like visualization, meditation, and really honing the power of his mind and his resolve to beat this thing. And with only that, and surgery, obviously, with these incredible surgeons who did help him, he was able to live for 8 incredible years, which is, if you talk to anybody who knows anything about glioblastoma, this disease is incredibly aggressive, invasive, fast growing. The cells are varied in a way that it's very difficult to treat, to get in there, to make any kind of a difference, really. And even today, let's see, he was diagnosed in 1995. We're in 2023, almost 20 years later. The life expectancy back then was around 3 months. Today, it's barely above a year. It's around a year. So not much has improved in treating this aggressive disease. And yet somehow, whatever it was that he was doing for himself was slowing the progression of this disease to an extent that he was able to have 8 more years with his family, with us, and document that, so that other people who are in that situation, who are in that hopeless place, being told that there's nothing they can do, that they know that there is hope, even in those kinds of circumstances.
So well said, because when that overwhelming despair is there, when that overwhelming, hearing that overwhelming news with the medical profession saying there is no hope, well, that's BS. There's always hope, even in the darkest of situations.
Mm,
And I can't even pronounce the name of the cancer that your dad had, but suffice it to say, a very aggressive cancer. And
mhm.
John McCain, Bo Biden,
Yes,
uh,
yes,
I think it was Ted Kennedy, have had this glioblastoma.
correct. Yes, so it's a disease that they're not even entirely sure the cause of, what causes this kind of brain tumor. They call it a GBM for short. But yes, just like you said, Ted Kennedy, Bo Biden, um, John McCain, it's claimed so many lives, and it continues to do so. Um, there have been some advances in mainstream medical treatment for this disease, but there's still a long way to go. And I'm a journalist by trade.
Mhm.
I've had a 15-year career in news and journalism research. And when we discovered this book, so my father had written everything down, right? He documented his journey, what he was doing to treat himself, with the hopes that that would reach someone else and help someone else in his situation or his circumstance. Unfortunately, he was not able to finish. He also was most likely very dyslexic and had a lot of trouble with reading and writing. Um, and towards the end of his battle with this disease, it became very difficult for him to look at a computer screen and to continue writing. And unfortunately, he did finally pass in 2003, after that 8-year battle. But this book and everything that he wrote, um, it, it ended up in a closet for many years. So when he passed away, I was 17 years old. I was going away to college, and my mom was now a single mom with 3 kids and trying to just survive. But it was always in the back of my mind, and it was always on my heart, that I knew that this book existed. And I went on. I had my career, and when I was finally at a point in my life, a few years ago, where I was able to have the time to sort of tackle this in the background, I did so. And my mother found the book that he had written, and I just wanted to show you real quick what it looked like.
Oh my
It was in
gosh.
this it was in this giant leather bound portfolio case
Oh
with
my
all
God.
this water damage because it had been in a shed, right? And we lived in South Florida. There were a lot of hurricanes and floods, and it survived all of that. It's a little moldy, but inside were hundreds of pages of his original writing. You can see that says "Hope for the
Oh my
Hopeless"
God.
there, and just and all of everything that he had typed out. Um, Terrible grammar, run on, which is fine, but it's everything that he went through, everything that he researched. And when my mother found it and gave it to me, I knew what I had to do. And I went to Kinko's. I had the whole thing scanned and digitized, and I started working on that. And not only to bring his part of the story and his experience, his advice, his regimen, and what he did, um, but to update it with the latest research, and my in-depth investigation of the factors that I believe led to his longevity, the faith, the mental fortitude, the nutrition. So I tried to pack this book with as much news you can use, which is as much information, research, interviews, with high level, reliable, doctors, nutritionists, spiritualists. And so the goal being that this is now not only just his story, but also it's a multi-generational memoir. It's a memory of his fight, and and ho- hopefully a lot of the latest information that can help anybody who's facing that fight today. Um, and as well, at the back of it, and for free on our website, I have put together a free cancer resource with resources both mainstream and holistic, and reading recommendations both mainstream and holistic, to help anybody on their journey. My father didn't do chemo, didn't do radiation. He only relied on this very holistic and spiritual approach to his self-care. But he did that because there was no hope, and there was no treatment, and there was nothing else that he could do, so he took things into his own hands. I'm not wholesale saying don't do the chemo, don't do the I'm saying listen to your doctor, but also bring in a naturopathic oncologist, bring in a mental health professional, build this team around yourself of more than one perspective, and find those people that are going to support you, support your journey, support what you want to do in your healing process. And don't just Don't just listen to the people who say go home and die. No, no.
Exactly.
You're worth the fight.
Oh my gosh, absolutely so. And you specifically state, like in the introduction part of your book, speaking of the chemo and the radiation, while my father chose not to do chemo and radiation, this book is not a wholesale endorsement of that approach, merely a testimony of the life he lived. And that
Yes.
is so true. So I knew when I read that I was in for one hell of a story, because I felt this determination. I felt this hope. I felt this hope in a way, it was very hard to describe. And as I continued to read the book, and I just want to show everybody the book again. And I'm famous for my sticky, so I do apologize.
It's okay.
But it really, he approached it from obviously a very personal standpoint, but also from a family standpoint, a faith-based standpoint. But also when he was describing his visit in the emergency room, I think it was about maybe 2 months or so
Right
after,
after his death. Hmm.
and your dad was not taking any BS from anybody, even in the
Right.
condition that he was in. And I'm like, this is one determined young man.
Yes. And it's also about what I think that people can get out of this is how to advocate for yourself.
Yes.
Because a lot of times, you go in there and you're just at the whim. You're at the whim of these professionals, who at times might not have your best interests at heart. And that's not to say that that's, most healthcare professionals, not at all. Um, but sometimes you've got to fight for yourself. Sometimes, you can't wait for other people to do it for you. You have to be your own best self advocate. You have to be the one, and it's tough sometimes, right? Because you're in a state of, maybe you're not able to in that moment, maybe, but have someone with you, whether that's a friend, whether that's family, have a plan or an idea of how you want to fight for yourself. Get your medical records, and get second opinions, third opinions. And that's what he did when he got his initial diagnosis of the GBM. He had his samples, he got his samples, and he had them retested like 10 times. Unfortunately, kept coming back the same. But it's what a lot of his advice, and in a lot of, I think, what his story shows is you've got to fight for yourself, as hard as that is. Even when you're in the thick of it, as long as you are lucid enough to do so, you've got to fight for yourself, because no one is going to be your champion as well as you. No one can be the best champion for you other than you. That is not to say that you, like I said, have those people with you, whether it's family, whether it's friend, like who understand your choices and what you want to do and can help advocate for you as well. But you know what? You're the head of the team. You're bringing all of these people together and you're fighting for yourself. And you're worth it. I think a lot of people maybe feel like they are not worth it, if that makes sense. And you are worth the fight. um and yes, he definitely fought tooth and nail. Uh he was not a gentle patient. You know what I mean?
I kind of got
The
that.
doctors were not happy.
Well, and we're by no means bashing the medical profession by any means, but your dad's knowledge and background really helped him out in a sense to be, he knew what he was asking, but more importantly, he knew why he was asking a specific question, or didn't take no for an answer and wanted,
Hmm.
which is one of the reasons why, he said that he got the samples and had them tested however many times.
Right.
But that
And
stuff. left him in charge, like a hope for the hopeless.
Exactly. And it wasn't an easy path. I don't think fighting for yourself is an easy path. At one point, so he did have recurrences of this tumor, but
Mhm.
instead of this tumor recurring within a matter of weeks, it would be years before there was a recurrence. So the first time he had a recurrence of this tumor was 3 years after his initial um, diagnosis. He had another incredible surgeon. They got, all of it out. And then he went another 2.5 years. So it was something about what he was doing was slowing the progression of this disease. But I'm not here to say that he was cured by any means. But I mean, this is without chemo, without radiation, without medical intervention, except surgery. It's pretty freaking miraculous. But that is to say, I was saying that it was not an easy journey because I believe it was the the second recurrence, which would have been the third surgery. Um, his doctors in Miami wanted him to do chemo. They wanted him to do these chemo wafers that they would put, in his brain after the surgery, and he completely refused. He said, absolutely not. And they said, well, we're not going to treat you. So he had to find a doctor somewhere else in the country, so who would actually treat him and perform the surgery. So and there's a picture in the book as well. We had to fly out to Los Angeles, to UCLA Medical Center, and that's where they did that surgery in the year 2000, because he was so determined. Some people would say stubborn, but so determined that he was going to do this and he was going to survive without the chemo, without the radiation, and prove them wrong.
And that's really a testament to the whole story because he did exactly that. Wow.
Absolutely. And we were talking about how he documented what he did for himself. He talks about everything that he did nutritionally. I think one of the first things he did was he radically altered his diet. He started juicing because there was not a lot of knowledge about these things back then. This was 1995. The internet was barely there. He wasn't getting this information from his doctors, so he was making these connections face to face. Like he was going and meeting with nutritionists, meeting with authors, going to people's houses, going to see speakers, and and working so hard to gather this information, in person. Um, so he radically altered his diet. He was using a number of books to sort of guide him in what he should be intaking to flush out his body, prime his
Mhm.
immune system to give his body that real fighting chance, to do its best work in fighting the disease. Um, and one of the things that he credited the most with his longevity, the most with his survival and slowing the disease, was something called shark cartilage, which was very popular in the 90s. This doctor, Dr. William Lane, published this explosive study in 1993, using shark cartilage in Cuba on a number of cancer patients, and had phenomenal results. Shark cartilage was very controversial. A lot of the clinical people here in the United States very much were critical of the methodology used in the study that Dr. William Lane had performed. Even so, shark cartilage exploded. It was very popular back then. You could buy it at GMC and other health food stores. Um, it is actually no longer available though. And so, this is one of the things that he really credited the most with slowing his brain tumor. The way it purports to work is the inhibition of angiogenesis, in that it prevents new blood vessels from growing to feed the tumors. And so I do a deep dive into this in a very unbiased way in, admittedly, no clinical trials have ever been conclusive about the efficacy of shark cartilage. However, what I did discover about the hundreds of clinical trials that had been done with shark cartilage is that none of them had been done in the way that my father used it, or in the way that Dr. William Lane had used it, and that was without chemo and without radiation. 99.9% of the clinical trials performed investigating the efficacy of shark cartilage were done on patients that were actively receiving chemo, actively receiving radiation, or who were late stage and had already done chemo and radiation and were, at death's door already. The way that my father used it was without that, because the proponents of shark cartilage argue that the chemo and the radiation just destroy any kind of benefit that you would get from the shark cartilage. It doesn't allow it to work. So from my own research, it seems like there wasn't enough done, right? All of these clinical trials were done in conjunction with the traditional treatments of chemo and radiation. I could not find a single one that was done with only shark cartilage on newly diagnosed patients who weren't already late stage and post chemo radiation. So that is my finding from my research into shark cartilage. It is unfortunately not really available the same way that it was back then. The federal government came in, shut down the Dr. William Lane and his shark cartilage production company. He unfortunately has passed since then, but you can still buy it in pill form for bone and gut health. But I don't by any means believe that that was the only thing that helped my father. Besides his nutrition and the supplements, and his deep and abiding faith. Like, let me tell you, he visited so many kinds of churches. Like, he didn't just stick with one church. He went to everyone. He was so open about meeting people and being parts of that faith community and asking for prayer and believing in the power of prayer, going to the beach, having conversations with God. He would go to the Catholic church by our house and get holy water, and he would pray over the holy water, and then he would drink it and pray for healing. But it was also the mental fortitude part, right? Because even if you're not spiritual or religious, a lot of that the power of faith is the same as the power of our determination, of our mental, fortitude, of a lot of that comes from us, right? From within. And the power of our minds and our spirit is one of the most underrated powers that I think that we have. He used meditation, hypnosis, visualization, positive attitude, tried to do that. He had somebody come to our house once a week and give him a massage. Like he was trying to prime his whole body, mind, body, soul, right, to fight this disease. And I wanted to share with you, because I try to pack this with as many reading recommendations as possible. But there was one author and a series of books in particular, by Dr. Kelly Turner. She wrote Radical Remission and Radical Hope. And she spent decades investigating hundreds of these stories like my father, where people, refused to die, and against all odds, they were cured and had spontaneous remissions or incredible longevity, like my father, that were otherwise scientifically unexplainable. And she aggregated hundreds of these stories. And she lists the common factors that all of these people had together. And among those commonalities were radically altering your diet, taking control of your health, following your intuition, using herbs and supplements, releasing repressed emotions, increasing positive emotions, embracing social support, deepening your spiritual connection, and having a strong reason for living. And I'd say my dad checked off about every one of those boxes.
I
Um,
certainly would say so.
yeah. So she has compiled these stories into something called the Radical Remission Project, which is also online. And my father's story is on there, is a part of that. Um, so it's just unbelievable. And I talk a lot about the power of our consciousness and how our minds are connected to our nervous system, to our body, and how the power of our thoughts can alter our reality. It can alter our bodies in extremely powerful ways. There's another author in particular, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who has written books called You Are the Placebo, Becoming Supernatural, in which he goes very, very much in depth into the power of our minds to radically alter um, our realities and how we are so much more powerful than we are given credit for. And that can appear in the form of like just improving your life in general, or in this kind of in my father's circumstance, um, radically surviving something that is supposed to be unsurvivable.
Yes, which that's just mind blowing, which brings me back to your dad's faith. And in the area where he's talking about trust in God, I just want to read something real quick
Sure.
because this sticks out to me. When what we perceive as a tragedy happens to us, we should not ask why. We don't need to know why. We must trust in God. That's pretty
Yeah,
powerful.
it is. It is very powerful because I think that when you start going down that road, when you start going down the why me, why this, and like it's such it's so easy to go down that. It's so natural and then, and normal to go down that path. But it sort of takes you away from that power and that light and that path of healing. Um, Acceptance and giving over to a power greater than yourself, it just takes all of that off of you. It takes all of that negative emotion. It takes all of that stress, and it puts it outside of yourself.
Mm,
And there is such a powerful connection between stress and damage to the body and damaging inflammation and in all parts of your body that have just been um, you know very strongly proven over the last decade or so. But in previous, up until the last 10 years, nobody thought that there was that connection existed. But I think what's really exciting about now is that we're starting to see science heading in the direction of what a lot of people have known intuitively
mhm.
in the past, and especially when you go into the areas of quantum physics. And I can't recommend Dr. Joe Dispenza enough, and him talking about the divinity that lives within us. And it honestly, it doesn't matter what you believe. It just matters that you do believe.
Mhm.
And that it's such a powerful help. I feel like we tend to believe that we are disconnected and that we are isolated and alone, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Everything about us being alive and being here and experiencing life is a miracle, and we are a part of everything else. We are a
Mhm.
part of the earth, we are a part of the universe, we are a part of the stars. It is incredible. And there's this energy outside of ourselves. There's so much that we don't understand but that we are a part of. And I think that we can tap into that power and that connectedness and that energy from right here within ourselves. We have everything that we need to make that possible. Um, and lately I've been this isn't part of the book, but lately I've been learning a lot about consciousness and the power of consciousness and raising consciousness and things like that. So um, there are resources in that realm that I'm also adding to our free online resource on hopeforthehopelessbook.com. If you go there, you can purchase the book, find the free resource with the holistic mainstream resources and recommended reading on the website there that either you can use or someone who is in this fight that maybe you can send their way as well. So that's hopeforthehopelessbook.com is where we have the resources for that. Um, but I feel like there's just so much more that I'm learning. It's an endless process, right? Um, and so in that way on the website, I can continue to update things and bring the latest research and resources to anyone who is currently in the fight. But that's my answer on the faith part.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And of course, I will make sure all that information gets in the show notes about your website. When you first held this book in your hand, when you took it out of the box, you showed us today your dad's portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from this, right? From the moldy binder that was sitting in a shed for 15 years to
To
right
the
to
book.
an actual published, in print, completed work that people can access and reach.
Right.
It was indescribable. And I think I was even more excited when it was officially listed on Amazon. Um, it listed on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Now it's on Target, Walmart, pretty much anywhere that you want to get this book, you can now get it online. Um, but I know how much he suffered and how hard he fought and how much he put into this. And it took me it took close to 5 years for me to edit this book, do the research, write it, complete it. Um, so I feel like our experiences are so interwoven, and to finally see that all put together, I was going to do everything in my power to make sure that this book existed and was real, and it deserves to be read. It deserves to exist. And I feel like what happened with my father is not normal. It was a miracle. It's something that, can really help people. Um, and that's I'm over the moon. I'm very, very satisfied that it is out there in the world for people and that it exists.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, the power of your dad's story. That moment when your mom handed over that binder to you and
Mhm.
bringing your dad's story to life in a way that honors his journey, how he fought, but more importantly, his faith for his hope, the love of his family. These are the stories that inspire us, truly beyond measure. And that's why I am a firm believer in if someone out there feels that they have a story to share, it's so important to share that story. And as you mentioned, this was about 20 years in the making altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. He even more. It's more like a 25 years in the making because his initial diagnosis was in 1995, and the book was finally published in 2022.
Wow.
Yep. So I'm not good at math. It was a lot of years.
A lot of years, yes, and we'll just leave it that we're both not that great at math, that's okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I think you're coming forward and sharing his story again is miraculous to provide the free resources for people to know that there is hope for the hopeless even in the darkest of times.
Mm.
Jamie, thank you so much for sharing your dad's story and your family's story. I am eternally grateful. And I know that whoever listens to this podcast or views it online, please feel free to check out Jamie's website. Jamie, can you give us all of that information again?
Sure. So the website is hopeforthehopelessbook.com. And under there, you can learn about the book. You can also access the free resources of holistic information, mainstream cancer resource information, recommended reading that I'm constantly updating on there. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. Just look up Hope for the Hopeless Book. And you can find us, and you can purchase Hope for the Hopeless on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, target.com, walmart.com. If you search for Hope for the Hopeless, Jamie Blanco, or just Hope for the Hopeless book, you should be able to find us. And I really thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for doing this podcast and connecting people with the stories that can help them and can inspire them and change their lives. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful that you are doing that. And a final message that I would like to just leave with people is no one has the right to tell you to go home and die. You are your own best self advocate, and you are worth it. And um and I love you. you know uh
Yeah.
Love is that, and this is part of what I say in the book, is love is that key, that energetic key to healing and transformation. um and if it has to start with me across the internet saying, hey, I love you, I do. And you are worth it. You love you. And you're worth that fight. And God bless and Godspeed to everyone.
Jamie, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. It has been my honor and privilege to showcase you as my guest speaker tonight. I am eternally grateful and I feel very blessed to have been to have read this book, to know that there is hope for the hopeless. There are those
Thank you.
signs. You're so welcome. Well, everyone, this is one of those podcasts. If you know someone who is struggling with cancer or some kind of an ailment and they have just lost that hope, please refer them to Jamie's book, Hope for the Hopeless. Go to her website. Again, I will make sure all of her information is in the show notes. Remember, if you have a story to share, as did Jamie's dad, you got to share it. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Thank you again, Jamie. My name is
Thank
Janice
you.
Mallow, the host of Stories That Inspire Us, the author series today, inspired by Jimmy and his daughter, Jamie. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you again real soon. Bye for now.